Dad, do you seriously think Mom's boss even knows your name? He has assistants for people like you. That's what my son, Owen, said to me. Not whispered, not mumbled. Said, loudly, over dinner, at a steakhouse I paid for. The table went silent except for the clink of his fork against the porcelain plate. He didn't even look up after saying it, just kept slicing through his ribeye like he hadn't gutted a man across from him. His mother, my ex-wife, now 4 years divorced but still entitled enough to pick the restaurant and drag me along for her idea of co-parenting milestones, didn't flinch either. Just scrolled her phone, eyes flicking across the screen like she was allergic to confrontation. Or loyalty. That moment, it didn't break me, but it confirmed something I'd been watching take shape for a while now. My son no longer saw me as a father. He saw me as a relic. A placeholder. The guy who pays for the meal, but doesn't get quoted afterward. I placed my napkin on the table, careful and slow. That's all right, son, I said calmly. You'll understand eventually. He gave a little smirk, smug and teenage and tragically inherited from the woman across from me, who only looked up to murmur, let's not turn this into a lesson, Russ. He's just expressing his opinion. Sure. Like that was all it was. I sipped my water. Not wine. Not bourbon. Just water. Cold, filtered, and pure. Unlike the atmosphere between us. I looked across the table at my son and felt something I hadn't expected to feel that night. Freedom. Not defeat. Not sadness. Just the cool, cutting clarity that hits when someone shows you who they've chosen to become. And for those of you listening, especially the fathers who've taken punches with a smile for the sake of being the bigger man, you know exactly what I mean. When the world tells your child that flash and status and names on office doors matter more than the man who raised them quietly and without spectacle, it stings. But it also sharpens you, makes you surgical. So if this story hits you harder than expected, maybe drop a quick subscription. It helps the team keep telling stories for people like us. The invisible ones. The ones who waited. Back at that table, I said nothing else. We finished the meal in awkward silence. Owen didn't even say thanks when I covered the check. My ex gave me a one-shoulder shrug, like she was doing me a favor letting me exist in her upscale world for 90 minutes. Then they left together in her leased Tesla, talking and laughing like I'd been the ghost of some waiter who'd hovered too long. I didn't go home. I drove. Not far. Just enough to cool the heat crawling up my neck. Ended up at a diner I used to take Owen to when he was 8. Back then, he thought scrambled eggs at 9 p.m. was the height of rebellion. Back then, he still called me Dad, with both syllables. The waitress still recognized me. Brought coffee without asking. Said I looked tired. I smiled. Told her I was just remembering things. She didn't press. When I got home an hour later, I walked straight to my study and opened the cabinet I hadn't touched in over a year. Inside was a black portfolio with gold corners and no label. Just a lock code and my initials etched into the leather. I entered the code. It clicked open with a softness that made my chest tighten. Inside were 5 contracts, each with the same letterhead, each signed, in careful black ink, by the founder of Hanover Equity Holdings. Kyle Hanover, my ex's boss. The same Kyle whose name my son dropped like gospel. The same man whose mentorship he bragged about online, whose office he posed in like it was the Oval Office, whose shadow he chased without ever asking how that shadow got there in the first place. And there, on each contract, under Hanover's ink, was mine. Russell Quinn, silent stakeholder, founding underwriter, with 19% equity and full veto power over operational expansions, compliance strategy, and executive reappointments. Legacy clauses they'd written off as ceremonial. Because I never used them. Never made noise. Never once asked to be thanked. My son had no idea who he tried to embarrass. His mother had no idea who she was working beneath. And Kyle Hanover? He was about to get a reminder his assistants wouldn't be able to shield him from. All I did was close the folder, lock the cabinet, and sit back down at my desk. My coffee had gone cold. I didn't warm it. Some things are better served just like that. The house was quiet when I got home. Just the click of my shoes on hardwood, the settling creaks of an old structure, and the whisper of the thermostat flipping on. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need them. Muscle memory carried me to the study, a room they used to call the museum because nothing ever changed in it. Dark oak paneling, a worn leather chair, the same bookshelf arrangement for the past 2 decades. Predictable. Forgotten. That's what they thought. In the back corner stood the cabinet. Not a flashy safe. Just a dull, matte finish cabinet with a 4-digit code. No one ever asked what was in it. Not my son. Not my ex. Not even the accountant, back when I filed jointly. People don't look at cabinets when you don't wear suits anymore. They assume if you're not flexing, you're fading. That's their mistake. I punched in the code and heard the mechanical snick of the lock disengaging. The door creaked open, revealing the contents that had quietly dictated more than either of them ever knew. 7 binders, a set of files, a heavy envelope. But what I reached for was thinner, a leather-bound folio with no branding, no label. Just one faint embossed logo in the bottom right corner, HEH. Hanover Equity Holdings. Kyle's playground. The firm he'd built his image around. The same one my ex now treated like the upper rungs of Olympus. She used to mention it in lowercase. Now she said Hanover, like it was a last name and a kingdom. Her texts were littered with things like, "We had a meeting with Hanover. Kyle said Hanover might expand West Coast," or my personal favorite. "Hanover is thinking about grooming Owen for corporate exposure." Grooming. Like my son was a Labrador. I opened the folio and slid out the top contract. 10 years ago, before Kyle was Kyle, he had a vision and no leverage. He was good at networking, bad at numbers. And I'd just finished a quiet liquidation from a merger no one noticed because I wasn't the face of it. I was the quiet guy behind the curtain with boring spreadsheets and a very patient war chest. I liked Kyle. He reminded me of a younger me, minus the discipline. So I backed him, helped him structure it, kept my name off the press releases. The agreement was simple. Class A shares, convertible, veto privileges on executive expansion, a legacy clause if I ever died. All of it hidden beneath enough language that anyone without a legal microscope would skip over it. I flipped to the signature page. Kyle's scribble in blue ink. Mine below it, neat, black, and unmistakable. That one document gave me teeth. But I didn't stop there. I pulled the second contract. It outlined the compliance protocols I'd helped write, back when Kyle begged me to make things investor safe for future audits. It gave me oversight rights for any internal restructuring that affected fiduciary compliance. Meaning, any sudden nepotistic hiring or conflict of interest promotions were technically subject to my review if I invoked Section 3. The same Section 3 that Owen's recent social media posts blatantly violated. Because when your mom works for the CEO, and your mom's son publicly implies special treatment from that CEO, well, the optics aren't just bad. They're legally radioactive. Especially when someone with veto power still holds an original agreement that predates every HR revision since. I didn't need to confront Kyle. I didn't need to call my ex. I didn't even need to reply to Owen's post, where he smiled in a designer button-down next to Kyle with a caption that said, "Mentors build futures. Thanks to real men who make moves." No, I just needed to trigger the lock. And the lock was simple. Inside the folio was a single pre-written email, a draft I'd saved years ago in case I ever needed to remind them who built the floor they were standing on. It was addressed to the executive director of the trust that still managed my holdings. Just one sentence. Request board session, internal compliance review, Section 3 rights. I copied it. I pasted it. I clicked send. Then I placed the folio back in the cabinet, closed the door, spun the lock, and turned off the study lamp. No fanfare. No fireworks. But somewhere in the guts of a corporate building downtown, a calendar just changed. And someone far younger, far louder, far more impressed with himself than he should be, was going to learn that some names don't need to be said out loud to own the room. The email was sent at 5:43 a.m. One line. No greeting. No sign-off. Just a trigger. A lever hidden beneath 10 years of silence. Then Russell closed the laptop and made himself a cup of coffee. No cream. No sugar. Same mug he'd used since 2006. Chipped on the lip, stained along the rim, but solid. Like him. He dressed the same way he did every Wednesday. Khakis, plain polo, windbreaker. Nothing that said wealth. Nothing that screamed legacy shareholder. Nothing that even hinted at ownership. He looked like someone's uncle. The kind of man who'd quietly return your shopping cart at the grocery store and not say a word about it. He locked the front door and got in the truck. Not a new one. A 10-year-old Toyota with a squeaky belt and a dent in the passenger door from a baseball Owen had thrown years ago. He never fixed it. Said it gave the truck character. And he meant it. By 7:15, he was pulling into the cracked parking lot of the Veterans Center just outside town. Most folks had never heard of it. It wasn't on any major donor list. No gala events. Just a few tired rooms, 24 folding chairs, and coffee that tasted like burnt tar. But it was his place. 3 days a week, he sat with men who'd been through things no LinkedIn profile could cover. He helped them with paperwork, drove them to appointments, sometimes just listened. That morning, one of the younger vets asked him, "You hear about that firm downtown?" Hanover Equity? They're freezing something big. Talks flying. Russell didn't look up. Just muttered, "Can't say I have," and kept sorting forms. Meanwhile, across the city, in a glass and steel tower with a view of the bay, a compliance analyst named Maddie clicked into her shared calendar and blinked. She scrolled back. Refreshed. Scrolled again. The new entry had populated in red. Internal Compliance Review. Section 3 Rights Activation. She checked the initiator. Her mouth dried. She stood up so fast her chair rolled into the wall. Russell Quinn. The name was supposed to be ceremonial. A legacy figure. Silent. Dormant. The kind of equity ghost who only existed in folders during audits. No one had ever heard from him. No emails. No calls. Not even a passive vote in years. Kyle used to joke that Quinn had probably died and they'd just never been notified. Maddie had even seen a post-it stuck to a compliance binder that said, "Check if RQ still breathing." Well, breathing, it seemed, and apparently wide awake. She stepped out of her office and hurried down the hall to legal. The in-house counsel, a man named Brennan, was in his office sipping an $8 green juice when she burst in. "We have a problem," she said flatly, sliding her tablet in front of him. He scanned the event, then the initiator. His jaw shifted slightly. "Quinn," he asked. She nodded. Section 3. That means a full freeze on Kyle's discretionary approvals until board review. Effective immediately. Brennan swore under his breath. "Has anyone notified Kyle?" She shook her head. "I didn't want to panic anyone before confirming." "Confirm it." "I did. It's real." Came from his trust's executive line. Authenticated. Timestamped. "They've already locked the compliance dashboard for reconfig." Brennan rubbed his face with both hands. "Jesus Christ. If he pulls veto on the initiative rollout." "I know," she said quietly. Back at the Veterans Center, Russell was leading a session about job reentry pathways for former servicemen. He handed out a hand-drawn chart he'd made on a legal pad. 6 simple steps to rebuild a resume from scratch. No fonts. No formatting. Just structure. When one of the older guys said, "Feels like no one out there gives a damn about people like us," Russell gave him a small, tired smile. "They don't have to," he replied. "We know our worth." "That's enough." Across town, Kyle Hanover walked into his office and paused. His assistant was staring at her screen like it had slapped her. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't look up. Just said, "You might want to sit down." He laughed. "What is it? Another PR hiccup?" She turned the screen toward him, and he stopped laughing. Owen posted the photos at 3:17 p.m. sharp, midweek, right between his econ class and gym. He was wearing a charcoal blazer that wasn't his, standing next to Kyle Hanover like they'd closed a billion-dollar deal. In one shot, Kyle had his hand on Owen's shoulder. In another, Owen was leaning against Kyle's desk, grinning like he'd just been named heir to a private empire. The caption read, "Respect is earned, not inherited. I look up to real men like Kyle Hanover, visionaries who build, lead, and elevate others." Underneath, a cascade of fire emojis, clapping hands, and comments from friends who knew nothing about anything beyond school lockers and weekend party circuits. "Bro, that's huge. Tell him to give me an internship FR. Power move FR." And right there, tucked neatly between the likes and the tags, was a little video snippet. Kyle, Owen, and my ex, all laughing in the executive lounge. Owen's voice could be heard in the background. "It's just wild, being around real leadership for once." That line, that one didn't hurt. It confirmed. I was standing in my kitchen when I saw it, coffee cup in hand, sunlight bleeding through the blinds like it had better places to be. The notification popped up on the tablet I only kept for news and reading briefs. The moment I saw Owen's name in the header, I paused. Opened it. Watched. Rewatched. He didn't mention me. Didn't have to. The omission was loud. What fascinated me wasn't the arrogance. It was the eagerness. The way he clung to the image of Kyle like a drowning man clutching a Rolex, mistaking shine for substance. My son wasn't being led astray. He was sprinting toward the cliff, convinced the view would impress someone. Anyone. I didn't call him. Didn't text. Didn't so much as sigh. Instead, I walked to the office, opened the lower drawer of the old metal filing cabinet, and pulled out a manila folder labeled Perception. Inside were years of little things. Newspaper clippings, screenshots, overheard quotes scribbled on napkins. No malice. No snooping. Just notes. I never weaponized any of it. Just believed that, sometimes, you learn more by watching a man brag than listening to him confess. I printed Owen's post. 3 pages, full color. One of them I folded cleanly and slid into the folder. Another I left on my desk. And the last? That one I tucked inside the back cover of a worn paperback I'd kept since college. The Art of War. He'd once mocked it when I tried to give it to him for his birthday. Said it looked like something guys without real jobs quoted on LinkedIn. Fair enough. But I knew the chapters he'd never read. Back at the Hanover Tower, emails were bouncing. Not publicly. Not yet. But in back channels and encrypted threads, the kind of messages that started with lowercase greetings and ended with NDA requests were multiplying. Compliance was auditing. Quietly, of course. Legal was double-checking the shareholder lists. Kyle, from what I heard later, hadn't left his office since morning. Hadn't smiled since lunch. His name was still on the door. But doors mean less when the hinges have already been sold. Meanwhile, my son was busy crafting image. He updated his LinkedIn, added a headline, mentored by C-suite excellence, learning from the best. He posted again that evening, a filtered photo of him at a rooftop event with the skyline glowing behind him. His caption read, "Some men speak, some build. I plan to do both." People applauded him. I didn't, but I did save that one too. Not out of pettiness, out of pattern. I had nothing left to prove to Owen. That door was closed the moment he chose to belittle instead of ask, to pose instead of learn. But patterns matter. In business, in people, and especially in family. And when the reckoning comes, it never knocks. It arrives dressed like opportunity. By the end of the week, Owen would try to call me. Not to apologize. To brag. To rub it in. He'd say something about how Kyle says I've got a future, and how Mom thinks I could be VP before 30. I'd listen. I wouldn't argue. Just like I didn't argue over dinner. Because some lessons aren't taught with words. They're taught with silence. And signatures. Kyle Hanover liked his mornings like he liked his image. Controlled. Protein smoothie, 10 minutes of high-volume stock chatter on mute, 2 briefings from department heads, and 20 minutes of performative presence on the trading floor. Then back to his office, feet on the desk, a fresh espresso made by someone who was paid not to exist. But that morning, the smoothie sat untouched. The screen on the wall blinked with red notification bars. And his assistant, Kendall, a woman who had endured his tantrums, hangovers, and accidental Slack rants for 4 years, stood in the doorway white-faced, holding a file like it had started burning in her hands. "Kyle," she said, no preamble, no performative chipperness. "You need to see this. Right now." He leaned back. "If this is about those idiotic interns posting memes on the company account again." "It's not that." He glanced up. "It's internal," she said. "Compliance lock. Class A." He blinked once, slow. "We don't have any active Class A stakeholders." Her voice barely carried. "We do." She placed the folder in front of him. He opened it, mildly annoyed. The documents were dry, dense, stamped with internal seals. At first glance, it looked like a routine revalidation request. He flipped past the headers, scanned the middle paragraphs. Then his thumb froze at the bottom. "Initiated by Russell Quinn." He tilted his head. "That name sounds familiar." "It should," Kendall said quietly. "It's on the original underwriting agreement. One of the legacy signatories from the formation packet. Look at the annotation at the bottom of page 6. He turned. "Read." Then read it again. Then sat back, jaw clenched. "Class A stakeholder, Russell Quinn. Equity share, 19.4%. Oversight rights, active. Section 3 compliance trigger, authorized. Veto authority, enabled." Kendall said nothing. Just stood, arms at her sides, like someone trying not to move during a lightning storm. He rubbed his temples. "How the hell is this real? That's ceremonial. Legacy holdovers don't pull weight. They do if they never sold," she cut in. "And according to the attached trust filing, he never sold." Kyle opened the next document. Quinn's trust had initiated an internal compliance review. Effective immediately, discretionary control by Kyle Hanover was suspended pending audit, which meant every planned expansion, every reshuffling of executive structure, every favor quietly promised over cocktails, frozen. His next breath came slower. Kendall continued, voice flat. "I've contacted Brennan in legal. He's already reviewing the clause language." "But," she hesitated, "this isn't one of those loops you can legalese your way out of. The equity is clean. The rights are live. And the lock's already been authenticated." "Which means—" "I know what it means," Kyle snapped. But he didn't. Not really. Because until 30 seconds ago, Russell Quinn had been a ghost. A name from the archives. A man he assumed had either died or retired into irrelevance. The idea that he was still active, still watching, and worse, still entitled, set Kyle's nerves on fire. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked down at the city below like it might give him an answer. "Quinn." The man who had come up in passing once or twice in old board meeting transcripts, always noted as silent. The man Kyle had, only weeks ago, joked about to Owen during a lunch. Some of these original stakeholders were fossils, useful at the time. Now, deadwood. Deadwood, apparently, had roots. He turned back to Kendall. Find out what he wants. She nodded. Already tried. He didn't list a reason. Just the trigger. Kyle stared at her. So he's not asking. He's activating. Yes. And if I try to override? The system won't let you. Not without board support, which you don't currently have. And she swallowed. If you force it, legal says he can initiate arbitration, which would open the books. Kyle finished, his voice like broken gravel. She nodded. Kyle returned to his desk. Saturday. Closed the folder. Everything he'd been building. Every shell company. Every fast-tracked hire. Every manipulated equity award. Was now under the quiet microscope of a man who'd said nothing for a decade. A man who apparently didn't need to yell to make himself heard. He looked up at Kendall. Do not tell anyone about this. Not yet. Not even PR. Kendall hesitated. What about Owen? Kyle's lips curled slightly. Especially not Owen. Because suddenly, the kid's little Instagram post didn't seem so harmless. Especially when it showed Kyle's hand on his shoulder. In Quinn's company. On Quinn's equity. With Quinn watching. Owen straightened the cuffs of his jacket twice before they even reached the valet. His mother was already halfway through a story about Kyle's recent board presentation. Something about restructuring authority lanes and expanding talent pipelines. He wasn't really listening. He was focused on getting the moment right. The shoes were polished, the jacket loaned from Kyle's personal tailor, and the reservation was supposed to be at one of the most exclusive rooftop lounges in the city. A place you didn't stumble into. You were invited. He was finally going to be seen there, not as someone's kid, but as someone with promise. The future heir to relevance. As they approached the entryway, the hostess stood poised behind the podium like she curated entire destinies. Name? She asked without looking up. Kyle Hanover, his mother said, smiling. We're expected. The hostess tapped the screen, nodded. Yes, table for 4. Right this way. Owen stepped forward, beaming. Hold on, she added, eyes narrowing slightly. Guests listed. Mr. Hanover, Ms. Wilkins, Mr. Laird, and, she squinted, Mr. Russell Quinn. Owen's smile faltered. That can't be right. I'm with them. She blinked. And you are? Owen. Owen Brooks. She glanced at the tablet again. You're not listed. His mother leaned in. There must be a mistake. He's with us. The hostess remained polite, firm. I'm sorry. The reservation is specific. For guests. No substitutions. If you'd like to wait in the lounge, we can try to accommodate later, but the main table is currently set. Owen's cheeks flushed. That doesn't make sense. Kyle invited me. I'm sure he did, she said. But the reservation was confirmed by Mr. Laird directly and finalized by Mr. Quinn's executive assistant. His mother hesitated. Quinn, she echoed. Behind them, the elevator opened. A waiter in black tie greeted the arriving party with a bow. Kyle stepped out first, visibly tense, followed by a lean, sharp-eyed man in a dark suit. Mr. Laird, the board's legal liaison. Then a third figure emerged, older, gray at the temples, composed in that unnerving way a man gets when he no longer needs to speak to be obeyed. Russell Quinn. He wasn't wearing a flashy suit. No expensive watch. No silk tie. Just a tailored jacket, black button-down, and a stillness that radiated gravity. He shook Laird's hand, nodded toward the hostess, and then, his eyes flicked once to Owen. No smile. No acknowledgement. Just a glance, like looking at someone else's unfinished homework. Kyle's mouth opened slightly, then shut. He didn't approach. He didn't greet them. Instead, he stepped forward to join Russell, gesturing the group toward the main dining room. Russell was already in motion, shaking hands with a man Owen didn't recognize, likely another board figure. The way Kyle walked behind him made the power dynamic unmistakably clear. Kyle wasn't leading the dinner. He was attending it. Owen turned toward his mother, stunned. What the hell is going on? She didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on Russell as he entered the dining room with her boss and legal team like they were old friends. Or worse, equals. The hostess tried again. We can seat you at the lounge bar while you wait, but we are fully booked otherwise. Owen stepped back, stunned. They said 4 people. That was supposed to be my seat. His mother, after a long moment, cleared her throat. We'll wait. They were led to a high table near the bar where the noise was louder, the lighting harsher, and the sense of exclusion impossible to ignore. Owen sat rigid. He stared at the reflection in the glass wall, watching the blurred outlines of the main dining room. Russell sat at the center of the table now, calm and silent, as Kyle poured him wine. He wasn't just at the table. He was the table. Owen looked down at his untouched glass of water and whispered, "He wasn't even supposed to be here." His mother didn't respond, because deep down, even she knew, he always was. They just never noticed. The truck headlights cut through the quiet street like a blade. Owen's tires screeched as he pulled into the gravel edge of Russell's driveway, flinging dust into the night air. He didn't even shut the door, just slammed it behind him with the kind of force teenage boys think equals strength. Russell was already outside, sitting on the porch, one hand resting on a mug of tea, the other idly turning pages of a book he wasn't reading. The porch light caught the outline of his shoulders, still broad, still steady, as if he'd been expecting this storm long before the sky turned. Owen stomped up the walk, his shoes crunching against the gravel like accusations. "You played me," he shouted, his voice cracking in that pathetic space between rage and realization. "You knew who he was. You knew everything, and you let me." Russell looked up calmly. "You let me walk in there like an idiot. The mug didn't shake. The book didn't close. You let me believe he was helping me. You let me post those photos. You let me say those things about you." Russell closed the book, resting it on the small table beside him. "I didn't let you," he said, voice even. "You chose to. Every word. Every post. Every brag. That was all you." Owen clenched his fists. "You set me up. I didn't need to. Why didn't you say anything?" His voice cracked again. "Why didn't you tell me you had power there? That you owned part of it? That you were behind all of it?" Russell leaned forward, elbows on his knees, gaze direct. "Because you weren't listening, son. You were performing." Owen blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means everything you said for show, for likes, for approval, not for truth. You didn't ask me. You told me who you thought I was, and you broadcasted it." Owen's breathing was loud in the silence. Russell stood slowly, not imposing, just present. The quiet kind of presence that makes noise feel foolish. "I watched you chase men with expensive cufflinks," he continued. "Quote men with loud offices. You didn't want a father. You wanted a figurehead, one you could stand next to and call it success." Owen's fists tightened. "You embarrassed me." "No," Russell said. "You embarrassed yourself. I just let you speak freely." Owen flinched like the words had landed harder than a slap. The porch light buzzed gently above them. A moth fluttered close to the bulb, spiraling. Owen looked away, jaw working furiously like he was trying to swallow fire. Russell didn't press, didn't moralize, just said, "You thought respect came with a title. But titles don't hold weight when the foundation's hollow." "Stop," Owen hissed. Russell stepped down from the porch, walking past him, toward the mailbox at the edge of the drive. He opened it, pulled out a single envelope, and glanced at the return address. "Your scholarship letter came," he said. Owen froze. Russell handed it to him. Owen took it slowly. No joy, no triumph. Just heavy paper and the slow realization that even this, especially this, had come under his father's watch. "How long have you been involved with them?" Owen asked quietly. "Before you knew how to tie a tie." Owen looked down at the envelope. "Was this always the plan?" "No," Russell said. "I didn't plan this. You just finally collided with reality." Owen opened his mouth, but nothing came. Russell nodded once. "When you're ready to learn, you'll know where to find me." Then he turned and walked back to the porch, picking up his book, his tea, and the piece Owen couldn't yet understand. And for the first time in Owen's life, he didn't feel like the adult in the room. He felt like the echo. The boardroom was quieter than usual. Not the tense kind of quiet that came before a fight, but the reverent kind, the kind you heard in courtrooms or funerals. Polished oak table, 12 leather chairs, and a skyline view that once made Kyle feel invincible. Today, it felt like an audience. Russell entered first. No fanfare, no announcement, just a quiet nod to the board secretary as she stood to acknowledge him. He took his seat, not at the end of the table where guests were typically positioned, but directly across from Kyle. Equal distance, equal sidelines. There was no nameplate in front of him, but no one questioned his seat. Laird, the board's liaison, cleared his throat. "Meeting called to order at 9:03 a.m. Attendance verified. Voting quorum achieved. Let's proceed." Kyle adjusted his tie, offered a tight smile. "Before we get into agenda items, I'd like to say a few words about recent developments. There's been some confusion surrounding our internal governance structures, particularly concerning stakeholder oversight." Laird raised a hand. "Before that, Mr. Quinn has a motion to enter onto the agenda." Kyle blinked. I wasn't informed. You were, Laird said calmly. It was filed through your office. Your assistant signed the acknowledgement receipt. Russell said nothing. Laird continued. Item 1A. Freezing of all pending executive restructuring initiatives submitted in the previous quarter. Item 1B. Reassessment of mentorship programs, with focus shifted toward underrepresented and veteran-led startups. New title, The Quiet Build Initiative. Kyle tried to speak. His mouth opened, closed. The chief legal officer, normally silent during these meetings, added, both items fall within Mr. Quinn's rights under his active Class A privileges. Per Article 6, legacy oversight trumps discretionary approvals if a compliance trigger is active, which it is. Kyle looked at the board, waiting for someone to intervene. They didn't. Russell finally spoke, voice calm. The company has drifted from its founding principles. We've invested in flash, optics, vanity ventures. It's time we build again, with discipline, with purpose. He didn't look at Kyle as he said it. Didn't need to. Kyle sat back, jaw tight. If I may. You may not, said the legal officer. The floor is Mr. Quinn's. And just like that, Kyle Hanover, the man who had filled rooms with his voice, who had once bragged about mentoring Russell's son like he was bestowing royalty, was forced to sit silently while the man he'd dismissed reshaped the foundation of the company in real time. Owen's Instagram captions never mentioned that part. The board voted. Unanimous approval. No abstentions. Even the members who had once called Kyle a visionary now watched Russell with something approaching awe or caution. Maybe both. Russell nodded to the secretary. I'll be assigning an external advisory team to oversee the initiative. No internal cross-promotion. Which meant, no Owen. No favors. No shortcuts. Laird leaned forward. Any objections? Kyle swallowed. No. Very well, Laird said. Moving on. But no one really did. Because from that moment on, the power in the room had shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was Russell. Not as a ghost. Not as a memory. As a man who had sat in silence long enough for everyone to forget he was there, until he decided it was time to be remembered. Kyle didn't speak again for the rest of the meeting. Russell didn't need to raise his voice. He'd already raised the ground under everyone's feet. The coffee shop was one of those forgettable places wedged between a dry cleaner and a tax prep office. No brand names, no Wi-Fi, no sleek countertops. Just a bell that jingled when you walked in, a chalkboard menu, and a man behind the counter who knew your order before you spoke. Russell chose the booth near the back. Not the window seat, not the one in the middle of the room. The back, where the noise filtered just enough to give you space to think. He arrived early, as always, and had already stirred his coffee twice when Owen walked in. No blazer this time. Just a hoodie, jeans, and the kind of expression you see on young men when the engine of their world has stalled and they're not sure who left the wrench in it. He hesitated when he saw Russell. Not out of fear. Out of pride. Pride in full retreat. Russell didn't wave him over. Just nodded once. Owen sat down slowly, glancing at the laminated menu like it might offer answers instead of omelets. I didn't order for you, Russell said. Didn't know if you'd show. Owen shrugged. Eyes still on the table. Wasn't sure either. A pause stretched. Then Russell said, no lectures. No scolding. Just a choice. Owen finally looked up. You can keep chasing men who flash titles, Russell said quietly. Or you can learn from someone who builds them. The words hung there, simple, heavy, unflinching. Owen opened his mouth, closed it. His leg bounced beneath the table. He looked toward the window like he might find a script out there. Something to say that would reclaim his posture, his bravado. But there was nothing. Just traffic. Just wind. Just the reflection of a boy who looked nothing like the man he thought he was becoming. Why didn't you stop me? He asked finally. I couldn't, Russell said. That's not how lessons work. You let me humiliate myself. I let you decide who you wanted to be. Owen looked down. And I chose wrong. Russell didn't nod. Didn't affirm. Just let the silence say it for him. Another moment passed. Owen rubbed his face with both hands. Everyone saw the photos. The post. The dinner. The fallout. Yes, Russell said. And I look like an idiot. No, Russell said. You look like a 17-year-old who believed what the world wanted you to believe. There's a difference. Owen exhaled hard. Kyle hasn't spoken to me since that night. He can't, Russell said. The compliance committee froze internal mentorship programs. Conflict of interest. Liability exposure. Owen flinched. Because of me? Russell sipped his coffee. Because of decisions you made publicly. Because perception matters in real business. Not just potential. Not just charisma. Owen swallowed hard. I screwed up. Russell leaned back. So now you get to choose. Stay in the shadow of men who perform, or walk into the fire and learn to build. Owen's throat worked like he wanted to respond, but couldn't find the right gear. I'm not asking for an apology, Russell said. I'm not asking for obedience. I'm offering access to what's real, but you've got to want it. And not for show, not for mom, not for followers, for you. Owen looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time, he didn't see a man past his prime, or a background player, or the guy who paid for dinner and got thanked with silence. He saw the weight, the patience, the man who waited, not to be admired, but to be understood. Russell picked up his mug again. Your move. Owen stared at the table. His pride wanted to storm out. To keep pretending this was a misunderstanding. A fluke. A trap he hadn't been warned about. But somewhere behind his ribs, something cracked. Not broken. Opened. Okay, he said finally. Teach me. Russell didn't smile. Just nodded. Because legacy doesn't start with applause. It starts with surrender. The press release went out on a Tuesday. No grand announcement. No media blitz. Just a quiet upload to the corporate site. A single email to the board, and a short article buried in the finance section of 3 mid-tier outlets. Hanover Equity Holdings is proud to welcome Russell Quinn to its executive board as a legacy stakeholder. Mr. Quinn has served as a silent partner since the company's founding and will now formalize his role in strategic oversight, compliance structuring, and philanthropic outreach. Attached was a photo. For men, 3 were instantly recognizable. The current CEO, the original co-founder, and the board's legal chair. The 4th stood just slightly off-center. Gray at the edges, shoulders square, suit pressed. Russell Quinn, shaking hands with the CEO, looking every bit the architect no one had remembered until the blueprints reappeared. In the corner of the photo, partially obscured by a decorative fern, was a younger figure. No name in the caption. No introduction. Just there. Owen. No longer in a borrowed blazer. No forced grin. Just a calm presence. Eyes forward. Shoulders steady. Like he knew something now. And he did. The post didn't go viral. It didn't need to. The people who needed to see it saw it. Cal saw it. His assistant forwarded it with a subject line that read simply, for awareness. He didn't reply. My ex didn't bring it up directly. But she sent a message the next day. Short, brittle. Owen seems quieter lately. More focused. Thanks, I guess. I didn't reply either. 3 days after the announcement, the internal portal updated the company's scholarship program. Previously called the Hanover Emerging Leaders Fund, it now bore a new name, quietly inserted on the site's sidebar. The Quinn Initiative. Same funding. Broader reach. Refocused on veteran entrepreneurs and legacy-first leadership. At the bottom of the page, a single quote appeared. Build quiet. Let the foundation do the talking. RQ. Owen read the line 3 times before saying anything. He was sitting across from me in the same booth at the coffee shop, weeks later. Same chipped mugs. Same sun-stained menus. He looked different now. Not in some cinematic way. Just steadier. Like a kid who'd stopped looking for applause and started listening to the silence between things. I didn't know you wrote that, he said. I shrugged. Didn't need to. You ever think about running the company outright? I sipped my coffee. No need. I built the system that tells it where to go. That's enough. He nodded, staring down at his own mug. Then, after a pause, Kyle applied for sabbatical leave. Yeah, I said. I approved it. That made him glance up, half-smile tugging. You really don't like being loud, do you? Noise is for people still trying to prove something. And you're not. I shook my head. I just make sure people get to prove themselves. Outside, the wind rattled the cafe awning. Owen reached into his backpack and pulled out a legal pad. I've been sketching ideas, he said, for expanding the program. Vetting mentors better. Less image. More substance. I didn't respond. Just turned the page and started reading. Not because he needed my approval, but because he'd finally stopped performing and started building. There were no trophies in my house. No plaques. No framed magazine covers. But there was one thing that hadn't existed before. A name. My name. On the letterhead. On the initiative. On the line that now quietly held up a world I had spent decades shaping from the shadows. Not revenge. Not vindication. Just permanence. And beside me, scribbling notes he didn't need to post, was the one person who finally understood what it meant.